Hello again. Alright, so this is going to be the last lab video. So you're going to watch this special senses video, and then you can watch Miss Graham do the other videos where she actually holds the models for you and points out the structures. And so this is going to be the senses, and it's going to include touch as well as the special senses. So what do I mean by that when I say the special senses versus touch? Well, you grew up learning that you had five senses, and you probably heard of taste and touch and hearing and smell and vision. Well, technically, a special sense includes equilibrium and not touch. Let me go back. So let's write these down. So you've learned of touch, taste, right? Hearing, smell, vision, and there's another one called equilibrium. Okay, now the special senses are these five, and that's because they have really complex receptor mechanisms. Touch uses a simple mechanoreceptor, so therefore it's not a special sense. So when you think of the special senses, you're talking about taste, hearing, smell, vision, and equilibrium. And for a lot of people, equilibrium is a new one. So again, touch is not a special sense. It's just simply one of our senses because it uses a mechanoreceptor and not a complex receptor system. But because we're working with the nervous system, I want to make sure that we always go back and think about the things that we've learned throughout the semester. And so because we did cover skin and we talked about the type of receptors in the skin, which are part of the nervous system, we want to go back and review those. So this is the skin model back from our unit on the integumentary system. So I want you guys to remember the Meissner's corpuscles. Remember, this is in the thick skin, so think about your palms. I like to think about discriminatory touch, like being able to read Braille. If you're Pacinian or Pacinian, depending on who you are and how you want to say it, these are your deep pressure receptors, and they're found throughout your body. And then you also have those nerve endings that are associated with the hair follicle, so that if a bug is crawling across your skin and wiggles the hair, you can have that sensation too. Because remember, your thin skin, you don't have those Meissners, but you need to be able to know something is crawling across your skin. So one of the ways you do that is using those nerve endings associated with your hair follicles. That's all you have to know about the touch sense. Just go back and review from the skin model these three nerve endings. Now, taste, you're going to see a model of this, or you may even see a diagram from your book. The thing you need to know is what this structure is, and that is your tongue. And a lot of people misspell that, so I'm going to write it for you, your tongue. And you should have a lab guide that you should be downloading that has a list of all the structures you're responsible for knowing. So that I'm just really going down the list as I do this video. You need to know your taste buds, and we have several. The taste buds are going to be concentrated in certain parts of the tongue, and one of them is called the foliate papilla, and it's better seen on a diagram, but they're these little leaf-like folds on the sides of the tongue. That's the foliate papilla. Then you have the circumvallate papilla, and that's going to be the papilla that kind of makes a V on the back of your tongue. And then the fungiform papilla, think mushroom, are these little raised areas on your tongue. So again, you can look in a diagram or this picture and just be able to recognize the three types of papilla and the tongue. All right, and then the next thing is the ear model. And the ear plays a role in both hearing and equilibrium. Okay, so hearing and equilibrium are senses that are both found in the ear, and different parts of the ear do different things. And so the ear is divided into an external ear, a middle ear, and an internal ear. All right, so the external ear, I'm just going to draw a line. Everything this way, okay? Your middle ear is, I'm going to draw a line kind of like that. So this is kind of the middle ear, and then this is your internal ear. Not exactly, but I'll be more specific here in just a minute. Again, you've got pictures of this in your textbook as well. So in your external ear, what we're talking about is the part that you can see and the part that you can kind of stick your finger in. So this is the external ear. It includes the auricle and the pinna. And so if you want to look in your book, you've got the auricle, which is kind of this, what you would call the main part of your ear. You have the lobe, which is where You can kind of hold onto the lobe at the bottom of your ear, and a lot of times women or men will have an earring right there. So that would be the outside of the ear. The helix is kind of the little swirly part on the kind of inside of the ear. Again, you have your lobe. And then you have your external auditory canal or external auditory meatus. And this is, if you can stick a Q-tip or your finger, that's the part of the ear that's exposed to the outside. So this canal or meatus is your external auditory meatus. Now this window here, this is actually called the tympanic membrane. You probably have heard it as the eardrum. So like a timpani drum, that's basically what it is. Sound will bounce and cause this membrane to oscillate and kind of move, and that's your tympanic membrane. So on this side of the tympanic membrane, you're now in the middle ear. And inside the middle ear, you have your three little ear bones, excuse me, I'm sorry, called the malleus, the incus, and the stapes, and I'm going to go to a slide that shows that a little bit bigger in just a second. But you have a second tube here, and this is called the auditory tube or the pharyngotympanic tube or the eustachian tube. All of those are correct terms. A lot of times people have heard of their eustachian tubes, but pharyngotympanic or auditory is also a word that you can use for this tube. Now the inner ear is that part of the ear that's actually enclosed within the skull. Okay, and it's going to include these two structures here, where the semicircular canals and this cochlea are. That's going to be a part of the inner ear. So let me flip forward and kind of give you another view. So here is part of your external ear. This is the auricle. You've got your external auditory meatus. Here's your tympanic membrane. And then here are those little ossicles, the little ear bones. You have your malleus, your incus, and your stapes. The malleus is closest to the tympanic membrane. Then you have your incus, and then the stapes is the furthest away from the tympanic membrane. And then here's that eustachian tube again. These are your semicircular canals. This is your cochlea. So you can see this all is enclosed inside the skull, making that the inner ear. And then here's one of your cranial nerves, your vestibular cochlear nerve. This is going to take the hearing and equilibrium information from the ear to the brain. So again, let's look at, kind of blow this up. This would be your tympanic membrane, okay? This is your malleus, and this is that bone here. So malleus, think of mallet, so the malleus. And then this is going to be your incus, and so you can see that right here. And then the stapes, it means stirrup, is right there. So those are your three ossicles. And we mentioned these briefly when we talked about the skull, the little bones of hearing. Okay? Now, the stapes is going to interact with the vestibule of the inner ear. So if you look at the inner ear, this is called the vestibule. These are your semicircular canals. And this is your cochlea. The vestibule, this area here, this is going to be involved in equilibrium as well as the semicircular canals. All right, so your semicircular canals, that's part of your equilibrium structures. And part of the vestibule, this part plays both a sound role, a hearing role, and an equilibrium role. And then your cochlea is purely for hearing. So inside the vestibule, you'll actually, when we learn about the special senses, you'll see part of it's used for hearing and part of it is used for equilibrium. Semicircular canals are just equilibrium and the cochlea is just for sound. Now, you can't really see the round window and the oval window on these models. The oval window is where the stapes comes in contact with that vestibule. And there's just below that, there's a little round window. And you can see that on some of your diagrams in your book. So take a look at that. I may use that as an exam picture. So that's all you have to know about the ear, just the structures listed in your lab guide. All right, so the next sense, special sense, is smell. And so obviously this is a nose. Okay, so this is the nares, the little holes that the air comes in. This is your nose. Remember your nasal conchae, so those little swirly bones you had inside your skull? Well, they're covered with tissue, and so as air is breathed in, that allows these to be swirled and warmed before that air goes down into your lungs. Also, you have little hairs in your nose, and that helps catch any dust that you may need to remove before it goes down into your lungs. Now, in the skull, that's where your cranial nerve number 1 is. Remember, cranial nerve number 1 is the olfactory. That's your smell nerve. Okay, so this is number 1. And this is what you're seeing. This is cranial nerve number 1, and this is the olfactory bulb. Okay, and then it sends little nerve endings down through the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. Remember that? Remember the ethmoid bone, the cribriform plate? Those little nerves will basically hang down from the skull into the nasal cavity, and that way you can smell things. So as you breathe in, things that are able to be smelled will be dissolved in the mucus in the membrane of your nose, and they can attach to these little nerve fibers, and then you'll be able to smell. Again, you've got a video about the physiology of that you can watch. All right, so that's all you got to know about smell. All right, now vision. We're talking about an eyeball. So we're going to look at the eye model, and so the whole thing is called the eyeball. All right. The sclera is the white. So when you say the white of someone's eyes, that's the sclera. The iris is the colored portion. So when you're looking at someone's eyes and they have blue eyes or brown eyes, you're looking at the iris. Okay? The little dark spot inside the iris, that is the pupil. Okay? There's a clear covering over the iris, that is your cornea, and it is continuous with the sclera. So the sclera kind of and the cornea kind of come together right here. So the sclera is white and the cornea is clear. Now behind the pupil you have a structure. This is the lens, and so the cornea and the lens work together to focus the image onto the retina, and the retina is where your actual photoreceptors are. So in vision you use photoreceptors, and so the retina is kind of the back of the inside of the eye. Okay, and this whole eyeball is filled with two types of fluid. In this main part of the eyeball you have your vitreous humor, and then there's something called the aqueous humor that's between the cornea and the iris. All right, you have your optic disc here, which is what we call the blind spot, and when you can read about that in your lab in your textbook. And your retina will send all the little receptors from the photoreceptors kind of converge and make the optic nerve, which, remember, that's cranial nerve number 2, and that will go to the back of your brain and allow you to see. You have also rods and cones for black and white vision. So rods are for black vision and cones are for color vision. So these photoreceptors are going to be all along the retina, and again, the cones are for color and the rods are for black and white. So another view of the eye. So here you have, again, this is going to be your eyelids that you're looking at. This is the lacrimal gland. Okay, so this is your tear gland. And so here's another lacrimal gland. And so they're going to be lateral, kind of above and lateral of your eye. And your tear duct, where the tears drain to, remember, that's going to be kind of right there where your eyes and your nose kind of come together. You have that lacrimal duct right there. So when tears are made, they flow down across the eye and they drain into the lacrimal duct. So that's your lacrimal gland. So in this model, we can see the sclera, which is the white part. We can see the colored part of the iris. We can see the dark part of the pupil. We can also see, you can't really see the lens on this particular model. And on some pictures, you'll actually see some little kind of red lines, which you can actually see the conjunctiva. And I'm going to write that down, conjunctiva. And it covers the sclera. And if someone has conjunctivitis, it's just an inflammation of that conjunctiva, which is a kind of a clear covering over the sclera. All right, so really there's not a whole lot on the special senses. Here's another view of that where you can see where we've taken, would be the vitreous humor, that they've kind of pulled that out and kind of let you see what the inside of the eye looks like. And there's your iris again, your optic nerve, and your sclera, and your cornea. I think that's all I've got. Yeah, so again, there's not that many structures. This is not a whole lot of anatomy for special senses. So just go through the lab guide that I've given you attached to your PowerPoint, and then you will be able to identify these structures on your lab exam. All right, guys, that was your last lab, so you're almost done. Thank you so much for staying with me all semester, and I will probably see you, or you'll hear me in maybe one more final video. Thanks a lot.